So what's the motivation for the study? Well, obviously, so Duolingo English Test has been around for a few years, but when COVID hit, it became kind of an essential test for people. And this is a random website from a US university where there's just, well, you have to get a 71 on TOEFL or a 6.0 on IELTS Academic, 100 on a Duolingo, as if these numbers mean the same thing. And so now that we are sort of coming out of this whole COVID thing, it's really important to know whether those numbers mean the same thing. My now new best friend, Andrew Balch, approached me to do this comparison. I was really happy to do it because I actually, being an American, I know a lot more about TOEFL than IELTS. And I also really wanted to know more about the Duolingo test and didn't necessarily want to spend a lot of time researching it. But since I was commissioned to do this, I was happy to do it. There is a little, if you want to see some actual test items, there's a barcode here. You can scan it and you can get a handout that has some of the test, the sample items. We were advised after our first draft of this report that we had to take out all of the Duolingo sample items, even though they're available on the web, but for copyright reasons. But anyway, you can see them there. I will be showing a couple of them here. I don't have a lot of time. You can read our report. It came out a couple of weeks ago. So I might not have time to talk about all of these things. Anyway, so just if we think about these two tests, IELTS Academic, Duolingo English Test, they're both English language proficiency tests. They both claim to target the CFR A1 through C2, can use them for making admissions decisions, and they test all language skills. So sounds good, right? But in fact, the task types are very different. So just a brief overview of the test content. You might be more familiar. I'm going to focus more on the Duolingo test because I assume that most of you know a lot more about the IELTS, so I won't even read that part. But the DET has 5 computer adaptive task types, and at each administration, because it's computer adaptive, you might encounter a different number of those item types. There are also 4 brief speaking tasks. It's like speak for at least 30 seconds about this picture, for example. And 4 writing tasks. Write at least 1 sentence about this picture or answer this question. And the maximum is 5 minutes. After we finished our first draft of our report, and it was almost published, they came back to us, Andrew came back to us and said, guess what? Duolingo has a new task and a new technical manual, and can we work that into your report? So we went back and looked at it. And I think this is very instructive. I'll come back to this later. They now have a new task called interactive reading, which I'll talk a little bit about, which may or may not be included as one of those, as part of the scores. It was unclear from the report that I read. One of them seemed to imply that it was being used, and one of them seemed to imply that it was going to be used soon. So hard to tell. But this is one of the things about a company like Duolingo is that they can be very agile, I think is one of those business terms that they like to use. All of the items are automatically generated and scored. And when I say automatically generated, they're using artificial intelligence, which goes back to our very first talk this morning. I'm going to show you an example of what that means in a second. But one of the things, if you read their technical manuals, they say, gosh, it takes a long time and a lot of person power to write and pilot test items. We want to get rid of that whole process and save money and time, so we're just going to automatically generate things, which is actually kind of cool that they can do it, right? Because we couldn't have done that 10, 15 years ago. And the score reporting, there's a total score, but instead of listening, speaking, reading, writing, which we're sort of used to, they combine, so they have one subtest that's called conversation, which combines listening and speaking. Reading and writing are combined for literacy. Listening and reading are comprehension, speaking, writing are production. So in some ways, that is actually, that is how we use language. So that's, but we'll see if we agree that like conversation is really conversation. So the this morning we heard for the first time about GPT-3, and some of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not, but it is this very powerful artificial intelligence text generation. And this just comes from something that came out a week ago where the person who wrote this gave the input to the system is, this is the transcript of an interview with an advanced AI named GPT-3 who is secretly a squirrel. And the input was, can you tell our readers what it is like being a squirrel? And this is what the computer says. It's very exciting being a squirrel. I get to run, jump, and play all day. I also get to eat a lot of food, which is great. What do you say to people who doubt that you're a squirrel? I say that they should come and see for themselves. I'm a squirrel. I'm very happy being one. So that is all. The reporter's lines were fed, but then the AI comes up with the rest. So this is just an example, and I think for old school people like me, it's hard to imagine that this is where things are, but I think we all need to understand a little bit more about this because it's coming, it's here, and as we were talking about this morning, it actually people use it to write their own stuff. So anyway, that was a little bit of an aside, but I just wanted to just bring that up there. So I'm sure everybody is familiar with the sociocognitive framework. Linda over here and Taylor and Chen 2015 did a study where they compared IELTS with several other tests for health occupations. And so rather than reinventing the wheel, we took a lot of our analysis of IELTS from that study and just kind of verified it. And these are some of the questions that we might ask, and they're very similar to the questions that I think Jing had for us this morning about automated scoring. So just talking about the test takers. So interestingly enough, the DET claims to be a general proficiency test, but if you look at all of their marketing and their website, the only test purpose they really talk about is academic admissions for higher education. Thank you. Although, and some of the couple of the newest reports specifically say that it is that is the purpose of the test. So I think they haven't had enough internal conversations about what their purpose is. So anyway, that's really mostly what I wanted to say about this slide. Feel free to, again, read the report and you can get all the details here. Okay, I'm going to focus mostly on cognitive validity for the 4 skills: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So again, you can see the sample tasks, but the IELTS passages are about 800 words. Read and complete, which was the only reading until they brought in this new interactive reading was 30 to 50 words in the C test. So you can see right there, big difference in reading. So this is the read and select. You get a list of 18 words, and which ones are actual words. This is it's kind of a modified C test. So you fill in the second half of each word, and then the interactive reading it's a paragraph, and you do things like what's the best title for this paragraph, and which sentence fits into the paragraph, and that kind of thing, which is kind of more traditional reading comprehension. So I don't want to go over this model carefully, but this is Khalifa and Weir's reading model, where we have on the left metacognitive activities, cognitive processes used in reading, and then the knowledge that's brought to bear in reading comprehension that mediates the cognitive processes in reading. So the cognitive process is in reading the degree to which these processes are invoked in reading for a test is referred to as the cognitive validity for the test. So these are just some figures from our paper. On the right is IELTS, and that's kind of the construct coverage that we found in our analysis. On the left, the darker green, that was before the addition of the interactive reading. And so they have extended the construct coverage with this new task, but it's still, especially when you consider that there's no extended reading, there's no global reading past a paragraph, and you think about in terms of the domain of academic reading, it's not quite there. Listening. Again, there's the same kind of task, and you can take a practice Duolingo. I recommend it. It doesn't cost anything to take the practice test. So you click on a word, you listen to it, and you decide whether it's a word or not. And then dictation. So that is the extent of the listening. So as you can imagine, just in terms of the cognitive processing, it's very different. It will be interesting to see if the next thing that they come out with is a little bit more of a listening test. But really beyond parsing, there's really no listening per se in the test. Speaking, I don't have examples of the tasks on this slide, but just because, so there is, speak about this topic, what kind of movies do you like, or something like that, and they'll say speak for at least 30 seconds, and then you're not allowed to go forward until at least 30 seconds, and then you have, I think, up to 3 minutes. So yeah, there's some possibility of self-monitoring and conceptualization, but it's very different. It is limited, and obviously it's not reciprocal. There's a little bit of planning time, but not a lot. Similar with the writing, where if you think about macro planning, thank you. Organization, micro planning, translation, monitoring, revising. It is, there's a difference between the two IELTS lengthy tasks and these 4 writing tasks, only 2 of which, possibly 3 now, I can't remember, are actually scored. One of them is just write for 5 minutes on this topic, and we'll show this writing to where we're sending your score. Okay. I'm going to skip the contextual validity, but I want to talk a little bit about scoring validity. And again, because they don't have specific listening, speaking, they have this conversation. It's a little challenging, but basically, and again, there's a lot of numbers and stuff. It's small. The main points here. So there's trained raters score IELTS automated scoring on the DET, and they have weighted averages for the computer adaptive part, and they're used to create a total score and the subscores. And they say in their manual, and then speaking and writing are added to that, but it's not really clear. They don't really say how they're doing that. But they monitor the reliability like any reputable testing organization, and so the test is reliable. For writing, again, I think that what I want to point out here is mostly what the scoring criteria are. It is based on a machine learning algorithm, so it's a single score generated from all of them. They're looking at grammatical accuracy, complexity, lexical sophistication, lexical diversity. These are the kinds of things that a computer can score. Task relevance, and I'm really glad I'm glad that Jing gave us a talk on this earlier. Those vectors and matrices and stuff like that he was talking about. And length, actually, interestingly enough. So similar with speaking, they do have some fluency and acoustic features because those are things that you can measure in speaking. And again, they're similar in terms of reliability. I know I'm blasting through this, but it's the end of the day, and you've got an exciting meeting coming up after this. Okay, but I want to talk a little bit about criterion-related validity. So this is the scatter plot of the DET. This is on their website and IELTS. So yes, there is a correlation. Clearly, if you are a novice language learner, you're going to get low scores on both tests. And if you are an educated Cambridge Don, then you're going to get high scores on both tests. But right there in the middle, so if you look at, this is 6 on IELTS, and these are the Duolingo scores that people got. I got 1 minute, okay. So they do talk about the Common European Framework. This is, but it's, this is, the IELTS, they sort of, their visual shows that it's a little bit, that it is fuzzy. I mean, it's not, and Duolingo kind of says, yep, 7 is this score. It implies that there is a direct relationship. Consequential validity, okay, I can talk about this later. People in China think that the DET is easier than IELTS, and especially in the speaking part. So I'm out of time, so I'm just going to give my conclusions. So clearly it's less expensive, more easily accessible than IELTS, definitely point in their favor. Computer adaptive makes the test shorter, also a good thing. So automated test generation makes it easy to generate a lot of items, which can help with test security because items don't get exposed more easily. But the construct coverage is limited. The scoring algorithms are not transparent. And the scores in the concordance table should be interpreted with caution. And then finally, I just, for those of you who've been around as long as I have, the TOEFL test used to be very discrete point. grammar, vocabulary, these are the building blocks, it's reliable, we love it. And teachers came back and universities came back and said, yeah, but these people can't speak or write. And so they had to make this transition. And so it will be interesting to see. I think they're already with this new interactive reading, they're already getting pressure to make it a little bit more academic. So it'll be interesting to scan the horizon and see where they are in 3 years. And with that, I will end. And